Look at these 3 dismissals in the space of 6 balls. England will not win the Ashes. They might even struggle to win a test if they keep playing like this. England had to win the Perth test. That's pretty much what everybody said. No Cummins, no Hazelwood, a new opening batter in Weatherall. They would never get a better chance to beat Australia in the series opener. And at the end of day 1, even after being bowled out in 32.5 overs, England were on top. They had a blueprint for victory. So how then did they go from a lead of 105 with 9 wickets remaining just after lunch on day 2 to defeat by 8 wickets less than 5 hours later? I'll be breaking down how England's failure to adapt with the bat cost them big time, how Travis Head pulled off a counter-attacking masterclass, and why, despite the humiliation, there might still be a tiny bit of hope for the rest of the series. First things first, this was no ordinary test match. So here are some stats. It was only the 26th time a test has finished in 2 days out of 2,608, the 7th time in the Ashes, and the first in an Ashes test since 1921. 847 balls were bowled, the 9th lowest in a test that ended in a result, and the 3rd lowest in an Ashes test. Head's 69 ball 100 was the 2nd fastest in Ashes history, Australia's joint 3rd fastest, and the fastest 4th innings century ever. Australia also became the first team to chase 200 plus at better than a run a ball, scoring at 7.23 runs and over on their way to victory. And finally, we saw the first ever instance of teams failing to score a run before losing their first wicket in each of the first 3 innings of a test. Just quickly before we carry on with the video, nearly 75% of you watching this right now aren't subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure you drop the video a like, comment and subscribe so we know to do more of it. You can also give us hype points, which helps boost our videos in the algorithm as a small creator. Anyway, back to the video. Let's start off with the toss, which England won and chose to bat. Now, normally that wouldn't be that interesting in Australia, but I thought it was curious that they would choose to bat first after picking 5 seamers and no spinner. All the talk for the last year or two has been about building a pace battery specifically for this series, and on a Perth pitch that was expected to offer plenty, letting their quicks loose would have been a statement start to the series. Look, it probably didn't matter that much in the end, and England's attack obviously did lay down a marker on day 1, but more on that later. We have to start by talking about Mitchell Starc, who, in the absence of Hazelwood and Cummins, stepped up big time. No Rory Burns first ball wicket this time, but Starc took yet another in the first over, working over Zach Crawley and drawing him into a drive that was never there. He stunted Ben Duckett's bright start with a fast, fuller delivery on the pads, and then came the masterpiece to remove Joe Root for his 100th Ashes wicket. Wobble seam, good length, angled back into leg stump at nearly 89 miles an hour, nipping back across. That delivery would have been too good for most players in history, and it was too good for Root, turned inside out before edging to 3rd slip without scoring. The opening burst was Starc at his very best. Every single delivery above 87 miles an hour with pinpoint accuracy in his 6-over opening spell, but there wasn't the excessive swing he's necessarily known for, which he noted after play. At lunch, he had figures of 3 for 24 from 8 overs. The rest of Australia's attack, 1 for 76 from 15. Starc found another beauty to get Ben Stokes after lunch, strengthening his grip on their one-way rivalry with a 10th dismissal in tests. And then Gus Atkinson, Jamie Smith and Mark Wood followed in quick succession to give him career best figures of 7 for 58. And Australia really needed that spell from him too. England completely dominated Scott Boland on the first morning. Brendan Doggett was on debut. Cameron Green had only just come back from injury, and pretty quickly it became apparent that Nathan Lyon wasn't going to have much of a role to play at all. Now, Ollie Pope looked pretty composed before he fell over a straight one from Green, but Harry Brook was the story of England's innings, approaching his first knock in Australia exactly how you would have imagined. He chanced his arm and counter-attacked brilliantly for his 61 ball 52, having arrived at the crease surrounded by first morning carnage at 39 for 3. Brook charged at Australia's bowlers 8 times across his innings, even twice in Starc's final over before the lunch break as a show of his intent. The first 2 balls after lunch showcased exactly what Brook is all about, beaten on the outside edge by Boland before responding with a 6-over mid-off on the move. It took a while, but Steve Smith did eventually bring about a change of plan and Australia moved to the short ball. And Brook, well, he can probably expect more of the same across to the rest of the series, even if gloving Doggett down the leg side attempting to actually evade a bouncer wasn't necessarily Australia's intended mode of dismissal. And yet, by the end of the day, England's crazy first innings, remember they were bowled out in 32.5 overs, was old news. So let's talk about England's 5-man pace attack in Australia's reply, because they were absolutely sensational. Carson Atkinson comfortably topped 87 miles an hour. Archer and Wood both 93, even if Wood didn't look his fluent self. Stokes was the slowest of England's 5 and he still hit 85 miles an hour comfortably. In fact, England's average speed of 87.6 miles an hour on day 1 was their fastest ever in a test since records began in 2006. They turned the tables with a stunning display of relentless, aggressive, hostile, electric fast bowling, and Australia genuinely had no answer for it, forced to face 2/3 of their deliveries on day one on the back foot. In the first 25 overs of their innings alone, Australia were drawn into false shots from more than 40% of the deliveries they faced. Even someone of Steve Smith's quality played and missed 12 times in his 49 balls. Archer set the tone by flattening Weatherald with a brutal 92-mile-an-hour in-swinger second ball, and the rest followed. Green took one to the face, while Smith took 2 separate blows to the elbow and 1 to the hand, requiring treatment each time. To their credit, Smith and Labuschagne stuck around for nearly 15 overs, but at no point were they remotely comfortable or in control, and Australia were going nowhere. After Marnus had chopped on off Archer, Smith had been squared up, and Khawaja had been bamboozled mid-air by Carty's steepling bounce, Australia found themselves 31 for 4 after 17.2 overs. What's that saying? Pace does funny things to people? Well, it was Stokes who benefited from a handful of cheap wickets, with Australia reeling from the onslaught. And that's why, even after an eye-opening defeat in 2 days, England will feel they've got some reasons for optimism. Equipped with the correct tools for these conditions like rarely before, they had Australia properly spooked. And not just one player either, every single one. But 24 hours later, that had all been forgotten, thanks to Travis Head and another England collapse. We'll go in order and start with the collapse because it was spectacular, even by England standards. Crawley failed to learn his lesson from the first innings and was once again dismissed going for a booming drive on the up, brilliantly caught by a diving Stark in his follow-through after just 5 balls this time for a pair. Duckett and Pope guided England into a position of strength at 65 for 1 with a lead of 105, but then came the unforgivable collapse. One of the few positives from England's first innings was how they played and nullified Boland's threat, knocking him off his traditional probing length and scoring at more than a run a ball. But it was Boland who sparked the dramatic turnaround, settling back into the metronomic rhythm that has brought him so much success in Australia. England lost 4 for 11 in just 19 balls to all but throw away the test and possibly their chance at the series. Now, Duckett couldn't do much about his delivery, but just look at the other dismissals in that mini spell. And to be fair, we could bring Crawley's first innings dismissal into the mix too, because they're all emblematic of a wider problem England have. Pope and Brook both attempting expansive drives through cover to length balls on, at best, about 8th stump. Pope looked possibly the most assured of England's batters across both innings, but he'd been beaten in the channel on multiple occasions in the build-up to his dismissal, including the previous delivery. For Brook, that was just the 3rd ball he'd faced in his innings, having just watched Duckett and Pope fall in quick succession. Australia's standing skipper sensed an opening after bringing Stark back. Root attempted something similarly flashy just 2 balls later, chopping on from another booming drive. Stark followed that up with his second dismissal of Stokes in the test, his 11th overall, and the damage was done despite Jamie Smith being dropped on 0 and brief cameos from Atkinson and Cars. But here's the problem. The threat posed by Australia's bowlers in the channel on faster, bouncier pitches, especially at Perth, shouldn't be news to England's batters, but their unwillingness or perhaps inability to adapt should have alarm bells ringing. England will not win the Ashes, maybe not even a test, if they continue to play like this. And then, well, the masterpiece of the test, courtesy of Travis Head. I praised England's bowling earlier, so let's get that out of the way first quickly. Still in shock from what had just happened with the bat, England's bowling lacked the same snap and bite of the previous day. The pace was down collectively and the pitch looked to have lost some of its spice. But that shouldn't have been a surprise, really. Pope and Duckett's initial partnership and the ease with which Carson and Atkinson put on 50 in 6 overs were evidence that conditions had improved. Personally, I found it hard to shake the feeling that while England's bowlers struggled, they shouldn't have been out there. It should have been 2 of England's middle order dashers making runs in the sun, taking advantage of the conditions. But that collapse turned out to be terminal, and it quickly became clear that 205 wasn't going to be nearly enough, especially with Head in the middle. Let's start with the baseline stats. 123 off 83 balls, 16 fours, 4 sixes, his century in 69 balls. It was an Ashes innings for the ages, one that will be talked about for decades. But this was so much more. Head came into the test in no form whatsoever, with 167 runs from 10 innings in the 3 months prior. Add to that a last-minute promotion to the top of the order with Khawaja injured, it's all the more spectacular. But that's where Head thrives. He's a man for the big occasion, where spirit, fight and instinct trump intangibles like form. It wasn't always pretty, but it was always effective and exhilarating, punishing the England attack that had been so devastating just 24 hours earlier with a taste of its own Bazball medicine. But crucially, with much better method and execution than they managed across the test. Head scored all around the ground, even hitting 3 of his 6s behind square, but most importantly, he pulled and cut England's short ball ploy to death. If Australia had no answer to England in the first innings, England had no answer to Head here. He took his side to the brink of victory and walked off to the applause of 50,000. It extended beyond Head as well. His relaxed, carefree approach looked to free up Weatherald on debut and help Labuschagne find his fluency with a useful 51 not out. I mean, personally, I think Australia could do worse than opening with Head for the rest of the series, attacking England, excuse the pun, head on. Even if he only comes off again once, and you can see how it could be many, many more times than that, that would probably be enough to win the series. Now, weirdly, it feels like I've spent more time talking about England analysing an Australian win, but I guess that makes sense, right? Australia won in Perth thanks to 2 world-class performances from Stark and Head, and England's collective batting incompetence. And that's why I think this will hurt more and should feel like more of an embarrassment than previous England failures in Australia. This team does have quality players who can deliver so much better than what we saw here, but they have to start learning quickly and find a bit of humility.